back to Read Instead. I'm Jake. Glad to have you here today. I remember in the last video that I made about It by Stephen King, at the end of that video, I said that if you've never read any Stephen King before, that book might not be the best place to start. Where's a good place to start with Stephen King? For me, it was Pet Sematary. Let's talk about it. So, welcome back, and I wanted to just give you a brief little testimony of my reading journey. As I mentioned in my intro video on this channel, and I think I've talked about it, before throughout a lot of the videos that I've made. Right around the beginning of the pandemic, when people started to really shelter in place and stuff like that, is when I started to really get off social media, or try to get off social media, and implement a new good hobby in my life, and that was reading. The first book that I went to was Tolkien's The Hobbit, and that was a fun ride. And then I went down to my local used bookstore, and I had never read a Stephen King book before in my life, and of course I knew who Stephen King was. How did I know who Stephen King was if I never read a book of his? I guess that just shows how sort of famous and popular he is. When you think of American authors, when anyone, whether you're a reader or not, thinks of American authors, that's probably the first one that comes to mind. He's had so many of his novels turned into great movies. I went into the bookstore that day, and I went to the Stephen King section. I think because I just looked at this, not this actual copy, another one, but I looked at the cover, and I was just sort of, the title just threw me for a loop. First of all, cemetery, as you can see, is not spelled correctly. And how do you make, like, Pet Sematary? I know what those are. I've heard, I know that some pet owners might bury their deceased pets in a cemetery and stuff like that. I get the meaning of that. But I was just thinking to myself, like, how could you write a full novel about a pet cemetery? That's why I picked it up. And I really enjoyed it. Let's talk about what it's about. A guy and his family, a professor, takes a new job, of course, in Maine. Like a lot of Stephen King books are placed in the state of Maine in the United States. They move into this house, and the opening of the novel is sort of that moving process. They pull up and, emptying out the station wagon and stuff like that. And he has a wife, and he has a son, and I believe they have a daughter as well, a younger sort of a baby daughter, and the son's a little sort of more like a toddler, 4 or 5 years old. He begins to sort of survey his property and stuff like that, and right in the back of his new property, there's a path that leads into the woods. One day he sort of heads back there and sees this pet cemetery with all these little grave markers and stuff like that of different pets and whatnot, and it's really sort of eerily laid out. So he sees that and he notices it, and he also starts to develop this relationship with a neighbor that lives across the street, and the neighbor sort of tells him, his neighbor knows that there's something different, and the ground in which these animals are buried in has a sort of an ancient Native American power. It holds a power that can do certain things. The point that the neighbor tries to get across to this man is that it's sort of a bad place, and stay away from there, sort of thing. They have a family cat, hence the kitty cat on the front of this cover here. And the kitty cat, unfortunately, gets run over by a tractor trailer going by one day. And, the kid is, his son is pretty upset, and it's kind of, that process. So it was that kind of deal. They didn't know how to sort of break it to their son, but they had to have that talk with him. And the Father says, well, what are we going to do? Well, there's a pet cemetery that's right down this path here in the backyard, and might as well bury it there, and we'll put up a nice marker for him and stuff. A few chapters later, that cat shows up at the front door. And when the cat shows back up, it's not the same as it was before. And he mentions this. The guy's like, you can imagine them. You can imagine the family and the guy experiencing this, and he's like, "What is going on? That cat was dead. I saw it. It was dead in the road. It was roadkill. I buried it. I put dirt over it. I put a grave marker on it. This is the same cat. I know it's the same cat. It has the same markings and everything. How did this happen?" And he shares this with his neighbor, that neighbor that I told you about. And this is it's an older couple, in their 70s or something like that. So he really knows everything that's been going on around that town. And he begins to tell him that that's an ancient burial ground. That's an ancient Native American burial ground, and it holds power, and it holds power to bring back life. And he tells him about a few different examples of throughout the years how different neighbors in that area have tried to bring certain things back to life, and he's just animals, different animals, and whenever they came back, they were not the same. They were not the same at all. This is where the story takes a major twist, and this is really where it takes off. The young son, the toddler, they're playing in the yard one day, and they live on a street where tractor trailers just, for some reason, they just fly down. It must be a straightaway or something like that. And the boy goes chasing after something, and tragically, he runs into the road, and he's struck by a truck. This is where Stephen King is just such a skillful writer, because you would think me telling you this right now, it's like, this is all right, this is far-fetched, this is out there. Well, what happens is that the father decides to use that ancient burial ground. I'll just say that and leave it at that. But you would think that's me telling you that is like, it's like, this is far-fetched. Of course it's far-fetched, but what I'm saying is that what Stephen King, this is how skillful he is. He makes the reader believe that, and believe and understand that this is sort of what we would do also. I heard Stephen King sort of mention this book in an interview, and he said something along the lines of what a great writer can do is tell a lie and make it believable. But what a really good writer can do is make the reader see the truth that's inside the lie. You see, the lie is this: you can't bury your deceased child in an ancient burial ground in the hopes of having them come back to life. That can't happen. But the truth that's inside of that lie is that any parent who's lost a child tragically, especially a young child, wished something like that existed. And that's the way that Stephen King provokes the reader in this book, is that you're fully on board with what this parent is doing, and you understand the rationale behind it. And I understand what he meant when he said that in regards to this book, because as you're reading that, when the father starts to go through this process, you're into it, and it's not far-fetched. The grief that the father has is completely conveyed to the reader, and it was to me, the grief that the family is going through. I don't know how someone, as far as I know, Stephen King has never lost a child that way. I'm pretty sure he hasn't, and but the way in which he makes the reader feel the pain of the family after losing their son is that's what drew me into this novel, and that's what makes the whole sort of the development of that plot really entertaining. All right, I wanted to give you guys just enough of the story that would make you interested in it. I don't want to give away any more than that. If I just told you that, it was about a family who moved into a new town and that there was a path that led them back to a pet cemetery that had sort of mysterious powers within it, I don't think that would maybe grab you enough. But me giving you the plot line of the loss of the son and stuff like that, I think now you understand why this book can be entertaining. It's not a huge book at all, and that's why I wanted to recommend it for anyone who it wants to. Again, what this whole channel is about is getting people to read instead, get off social media, get off the electronics, get off looking at screens for hours and hours a day, and pick up a book instead. We all know who Stephen King is, and I think this is a great place to start with Stephen King. So I'll leave it at that. Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I'll see you guys next time.